A CNBC original podcast.
We all have to make big decisions in our lives, decisions that define and influence our professional and personal journeys. If you reflect on them, some are good and some I'm sure you'll definitely regret. In my nearly 3 decades as a financial journalist, I've interviewed literally thousands of CEOs, politicians and market voices, and they all had to make decisions to get to where they are today. In this podcast, I hear about those choices as well as the moments of doubt, risk and conviction that impacted our guests' journeys and the people they lead. This is Executive Decisions with me, Steve Sedgwick. In this episode, I speak to Andrea Rossi.
The gentleman who was interviewing, he asked me the question, he said, what is it you would like to be in 5 to 10 years? And I said, I want to become a CEO. I want to run a big business.
Andrea is the CEO of investment management firm M&G. Despite being an incredibly successful business leader, he's a man who enjoys being out of his comfort zone. That mindset has led to both triumphs and setbacks, but his entrepreneurial spirit has never wavered.
I feel like an entrepreneur. In whatever role I've been, I always felt as if I was owning the company. When I worked for GE Lighting, I used to go to hotel rooms and check all the light bulbs just to make sure they were GE. And if they were not GE, I would turn them off and say that they didn't work.
Andrea's background is as diverse as his career. A Frenchman with a Swedish mother and Italian father, now living in London. He credits his pan-European roots with shaping his adaptability and leadership style.
I knew I was always going to work in Europe, and I wanted to work in Europe. I believe in Europe, and I want Europe to succeed.
These are Andrea Rossi's executive decisions. You have a Swedish mother, you have an Italian father, you are fluent in at least 4 languages, you speak different languages to different members of your family. You were born in Stockholm, but you were schooled in the French system, Brussels, London, South Kensington Lycée. You've been around a lot as well, isn't it? What do you consider yourself?
I consider myself a true European, of course. I love Europe. I love its history, its heritage. I love the fact that Europe has great places, and all these places you mentioned, the capital, Stockholm, Brussels, London in particular, which is my town, which I live the most, are great. But it's true. I mean, my mother is Swedish, my father is Italian. The French brought me up, and yes, I've lived in London most of the time. So yes, I'm a true European. When people ask, where are you from? I said, I'm European.
Yeah, and I can't place you. As I say, you strike me as a real Londoner for sure, but I'm a real Londoner, and I've got no exotic international heritage as well. So, I mean, that has given me a grounding that I know that I'm from London, that's who I am, and 2 English parents. It's a bit dull, but I know where I'm from. Has it affected you in knowing who you are and where you're from?
No, it has. I mean, and London has always been for me the international capital of the world, and that's why I was attracted by London. In London, everywhere you go, you would sit in a restaurant, you will hear 4 or 5 different languages, not only European languages. So no, it has not affected me. I think being pan-European has helped me to adapt better also elsewhere in the world. It has helped me when I do business in Asia, in Japan, or even in Latin America or in North America.
Yeah, it's interesting. You notice the adaptability of the members of my team who have got an exotic or international background. We've got a producer sitting over there she's Canadian. She's lived in Singapore all her life. She loves London now as well. And it does give a degree of resilience and adaptability and perhaps a world open view rather than a closed mindset. Certainly.
I mean, it helps you to adapt when you're in different cultures. Swedish and Italian is probably the most opposite you can think of in Europe.
I think so.
Yes, I know you have
I have my own knowledge of the
You have your own knowledge
yeah.
of Sweden, but and we should not make any stereotypes. But for sure, in Sweden, they are organized, they're calm. The Italians are probably more passionate, flexible, innovative. They're certainly not calm.
No.
And if you put them together, well, it can be a pretty good mixture. But I think what it has helped me a lot is it helped me to adapt and to listen, to understand other cultures. That's why also when I spend time in Latin America or spend time in Asia or Japan, I managed to better relate to other people.
You mentioned the qualities of the Italians and the qualities of the Swede. I'm an enormous fan of both as well. But is there sometimes a conflict in Andrea Rossi of whether you are that Italian or whether you are that Swede? or indeed French, dare I say it, due to your education?
Well, sorry, it doesn't help to be called Andrea Rossi because everybody thinks I'm Italian.
Which I did as well.
I probably
when I first
look
met
Italian as well. But no, there's been conflict. I think people expect me to be a bit more Italian, and I probably feel a bit more Swedish sometimes. I lived 14 years in Stockholm. And given my mother was Swedish, generally a boy is nearer her mother than her father. I hope my father will accept that. But it has created sometimes some conflicts, but I would say I always try to take the best from both and use it to my advantage.
What is the worst of both?
The worst of both is, well, Italians, we go into stereotypes, so it's difficult. But
you can say that because you're half Italian.
Yes, I know I can. No, Italians generally would speak before they think. So it will be very emotional. Whereas the Swede, they will ponder a lot before they speak. Sometimes they would not speak. I think they complement each other. It's funny to see my father would say things he didn't mean. My mother would never say a thing she didn't mean. My Italian wife would tell me things that she probably would not mean 5 minutes later. I would never ever say something that I do not mean. So
there's a great meme going around about the Swedes who are having a meeting and the man who makes the big faux pas of starting the meeting talking about the agenda rather than talking about the weekend and how everyone is and everything. And I think with my affinity for Sweden, my family there, it's fairly true.
No, the Swedes are organized, and I'm the kind of person that, if I have an IKEA, I follow the guide. My father would never follow the guide, and then there will be pieces left, and he said, "Well, the table still looks okay." Yes, Papa, but still there are these things you should have followed the guide, and I would always follow the guide.
So you've had a brilliant education as well. I mentioned the Lycée in South Ken and various European cities as well. You did your degree in Sapienza, and then perhaps the most formative thing was your MBA and INSEAD as well. Did you enjoy doing the MBA? Is it laid the platform for the future career that you've had?
Yes, I mean, going back to my heritage, I believe in Europe, and I wanted to do something where I could then stay in Europe. And the INSEAD is probably the MBA for Europeans or for non-Europeans that want to work in Europe. So it helped me a lot. Sapienza, I did economy and commerce. So what I studied at the MBA was similar, but for sure, it was a great opportunity to meet other cultures, work on business cases together with different nationalities, and interesting enough, seeing how they all adapted to each other. You would always have the French who would say, "I insist, listen to me because I have analyzed this all night." The Lebanese who would try to sell us everything and other things during the case. And then, of course, the Germans and Swedes were very, very organized. So it was good. It was formative, but it created, I'd say, a good basis for then taking off in Europe. I mean, I knew I was always going to work in Europe, and I wanted to work in Europe. I believe in Europe, and I want Europe to succeed.
And of all places to end up after that, Enfield, North London. Now, I can say this with affinity because I'm from that part of the world. Oh, yeah. I was from the neighbouring town part of London as Enfield, so I know it pretty well. But this was, and we're moving on to some of your key decisions now as well. You made the decision to join GE, which is an education itself, working in the world of Jack Welch and then Jeff Immelt thereafter.
Yes.
I at CNBC am a former employee of GE, of course, from our heritage. Tell me a little bit about that, because you say that was one of your best decisions ever.
It was, in my view, from a career perspective, it was, and even formative experience, was the best ever decision. It's interesting, when you came out from MBA, if you ask anyone, this was during the 90s, they all want to become bankers or consultants. And of course, everybody wanted a job in a city. And there I was, and I took a job with GE. I had the offers from others, but I decided to go for GE. And I went for GE for a very simple reason. The gentleman who was interviewing, he asked me the question, he said, "What is it you would like to be in 5 to 10 years? And I said, "I want to become a CEO. I want to run a big business."
That was the right answer, by the way.
That was the right answer. And he said, "Okay, and you think you're going to become a CEO by going to an investment bank?" And I said, "Yes, of course. I'll become then a CFO, and then from a CFO, I'll become a CEO." Okay, and in consulting, he said, "Well, in consulting as well, I learn about an industry, then I become the head of strategy in a company, and then from there I move on. And he said, "Okay, what about if I told you you can become a CEO directly? Maybe not with the title, but we're going to make you go and work in a factory as a product manager up in Enfield. I didn't even know where
Thorn
Lighting, called GE Lighting. But it was Thorn Lighting up in Enfield. He said it was London. So I said, of course, London is fine. I did not know it was so far up north.
It's not the West End, is it? I say this with affinity from being an East End boy. Enfield is not Hyde Park. It's not Park Lane, is it?
It's not. Yeah, it's not Mayfair. It's not the city. It's it was a different place, and it was a bit further than I thought. But it was a great experience. It allowed me to work with people and focus on people management. It allowed me to work on processes, which are key.
Yeah.
You're talking about production here, input, outputs. But more importantly, it allowed me to have a P&L from the start. So I had a P&L, I had clients, I had production, I had people management. I was only 28 years old.
Yeah.
No city job would give you that directly after an MBA.
I mean, I started off on the trading floor and they gave me a P&L quite quickly. It was terrifying for a young man. So enormous responsibility early on as well. And I mentioned GE as a job, but actually it was GE that we both know from then. It was an education as well. They put you in one division, then you end up in another and another and another. And there is a model there, and Six Sigma as well. That was pretty much the Jack Welch education. Of course, it's formally developed by Motorola. Tell me a little bit and tell our listeners about Six Sigma, because it is still very powerful to this day and has its criticisms as well.
Well, I have Six Sigma for me has always followed me. I believe it's a super important topic and it's based on processes, but it starts with clients. It's understanding, first of all, who are your clients and what is critical to your clients. What are they looking for? What kind of what they call CTQ, critical to quality. What were they looking for in terms of service, in terms of output? And of course, there's a process that delivers that output. So Six Sigma is making sure that process delivers Six Sigma result to clients, which means 3.4 defects out of 1 million, which is effectively what happens when you fly with a plane. That's what you want. You want Six Sigma. You want to make sure that the plane arrives safely. On an average, processes actually are sort of 3 Sigma. So they deliver 7-8% defects every time. So it's understanding the clients, redesigning processes, and of course, who are doing that? People. So it's people, process, client. And that's something that always have followed me. Whatever I've done, any job afterwards, I always look from a client perspective, from a process perspective, and then making sure we have the right people in order to execute.
So it's followed you in the 25 years plus since then as well.
Yes.
But it has its criticisms that it doesn't always work. And it doesn't work sometimes because not everyone gets the buy-in, not everyone is selected correctly, not everyone in management fully adheres to it. There's a lack of awareness of the benefits as well, and there is resistance to culture change. Have you come across those as reasons why it hasn't worked in your career?
Yes, it at the end of the day, like any initiative, if it doesn't come from the top, and if the CEO is not passionate about it, it will be difficult to get it through. In GE, it worked very well. I would say in Motorola probably did not work very well because there was not that leadership focusing on it. It became more technical. In GE, it was driven by Jack Welch, and it was driven by all the leadership team. And actually, they put their best people in Six Sigma. And I think that is how you actually get the culture then to embrace it. The reality is, it's a technique, and who executes on it are the people. If you don't then have the right people, the right culture, you will never succeed. So the cases where it has not worked, I think it's because there was not the right sponsorship and most likely not the right people delivering on it.
And yet, earlier on in our conversation already, you've talked about a couple of your skills that you got from your very early moving around Europe was your flexibility and adaptability. Does Six Sigma necessarily value those qualities? Because if you stick to a doctrine, you stick to a set of rules, that doesn't necessarily mean you can be flexible and adaptable with those rules.
Yes, but it's true because Six Sigma, you're right, you measure, you have a process, but you can also redesign the process. So that could be also because your client's needs, they change constantly, and you might have a process which is not fit for purpose, and therefore you need to redesign and design for Six Sigma. So it actually allows you to have that flexibility.
I'll talk about M&G a little bit later on as well. But when you come into M&G, you were the newish CEO, October 2022, up until this moment as well. And maybe you mentioned Six Sigma, maybe you mentioned the style of it as well. has it been tough for the team to kind of take on board this new idea?
I have, yes. I mentioned it. We have implemented it to a certain degree. I would call it more agile or lean Sigma. But I think when you think about Six Sigma, you need to think about, first of all, it's about clients. Any organization should know their clients, and they should adapt to making sure that they deliver outcomes to the clients. And clients, of course, can be internal or external. But then what is it that actually delivered that? It's a process. Everything is a process. Selling is a process. Servicing is a process. Innovating is a process. And ultimately, it's the people that makes it work. So it's client, process, people. And I think the big focus I had when I entered into M&G was more focus on clients. This was a business which had not been growing for many years, and now we're growing again.
Yeah.
Improving our processes, so taking out the complexity of our processes, so the client outcomes were better. But more importantly, making sure I had true people leaders, people that knew how to lead teams. Not technical experts only, but people that were interested in people, team management, team spirit. That is the competitive advantage of any firm in the world. And that's, of course, what we're trying to aspire at M&G.
And for me, when I see the best leaders and I see the best people and the best people I work with at CNBC, they have empathy, they have kindness, they have team spirit. They do not have this overriding ego. I am probably the person with the biggest ego in my team. And yet the qualities which I admire most are when we work together and we say, we haven't got a big personality, we're going to do this together. That's important for you in all your roles?
It's very important for me. I did a lot of sports when I started 7-year-old, and I loved team sports. I was always the captain of any team sport we did, not because I was the best player, but because I listened to people. I was generally interested in having the different views. And that has always followed me whenever I believe if you can create a strong team, then you can do anything. And winning as a team is much better than winning by yourself. Yeah. And by the way, losing as a team, it's even better because you learn so much as a team.
Tell me a little bit more about sport. I didn't expect to go down this way as well, but what sport did you play? Just tell me a little bit more about how you enjoyed it. And again, you wanted to be the captain though, yeah?
No, well, it's not that I wanted to be a captain. They chose me as a captain. I was generally already when we played football, the coach, but ultimately I even ended up being coach. We had when I was at the French Lease in Stockholm, we had a basketball team. We had no coach, and I was the coach and the captain. And we used to come to these games against other schools. There was a coach there. I said, "Where is your coach?" And they said, "No, Andrea is our coach."
Yeah.
And they looked at me and said, and then we won the game.
So
and
there
they
was
were
always
wondering
part
how,
of you that was team-spirited, but actually liked to lead.
Yes, but because I was interested in people. This comes from my Swedish grandfather, he was a Swedish captain of the Swedish Navy. He from the very beginning, Andrea, you always have to first put the team, the community in front, and never think about yourself. It was always about making sure you put the team as the key topic in front of you. And I followed him. I mean, already he was doing all kind of sports, and I saw how he was acting with his team, and he explained me how even in the Navy it was all about a team effort. Yes, there were decisions, but it was always the best outcome you got out of the team. So I was always very interested in it. I'm generally interested in people, and I think it has also to do with my background being half Swedish, half Italian, brought up by the French. All that has helped.
But it's come up so much already in the short time we've been speaking that the mentorship and the bond you've got from your family, you've mentioned all sides of your family already, and it just grounds everyone in life. It just gives you something that's a huge foundation for everything else you achieve or don't achieve in life. You've always got your family.
Yes, you always got the family. No, exactly. No, family, and this is probably a bit more Italian, but family is the center of what we do. I mean, we live because of our family.
Yeah. Okay. So we've had the big epiphany of GE and Six Sigma, and you've learned the processes which have stuck with you throughout your career. But you were an industrialist then. You're at GE, and then you moved on to GE Capital, and you could have spent the rest of your career there maybe. But you've gone then and spent 20 years, I think from 1999 to AXA.
Yes.
Tell me about this amazing period of your life where now you've gone from being an industrialist to a banker.
Well, AXA was an interesting one because obviously it was a French company, and I knew the French very well, given that I've been in the French school all my life as a student. And when AXA came around, I still remember I thought, oh, it's French and it's insurance, must be boring. But I still went for the interview. And then I was very, very lucky to meet two gentlemen. First, Denis Duverne, who was the group finance director, and then Henri de Castres, who was the group CEO. And of course, when I met, in particular, Henri, I felt, this is a Jack Welch, but much younger. And yes, I felt this is the company I want to be. I want to be with these people. And they were extremely international. The story of AXA was very interesting because they started out very, very small, and then they did acquisitions. A little bit like G. G Capital was all about acquisitions, but then very centralized, putting their culture, their name everywhere. Everything they acquired became AXA very quickly. So it's like a G, but with a French flair. So yes, I was. It was very, very interesting. I did M&A, and then I of course, they gave me responsibilities of big businesses, which I enjoyed in the Middle East and Italy. And then I moved from insurance to asset management as well during AXA. So yes, it was very formative. And I have to say, my big mentor was, there were two, was Denis Duverne and Henri de Castres, and obviously they're. And
you say they were very much like Jack Welch in terms of the attitude as well. But having worked for a French bank myself in the 90s, Crédit Lyonnais for many years, and it was a very different culture, from the British bank I'd worked for previously as well. Tell me a little bit about the differences of working for a French financial institution compared with working with G. I can't imagine them being more different.
Well, from the outset, I thought so as well. But AXA is probably the most anglicized French company.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing in the eyes of the French.
No, well, yes, but and by the way, we were criticized because we were always presenting in English. We present our full year results. We do it in English. All the meetings, although we were speaking French, they were always in English. Everything was done in English. So I think that helped. Yes, the French are a little bit different than the Americans. The Americans, they will look at 80% of the problem, and then they say, okay, let's go for it. The French would look at 99.9, and they will analyze again, and then they will analyze again, and then they might go for it. It's a different culture, but no, AXA was very dynamic, and I have to say, I felt it very Anglo-Saxon too, very pragmatic, and of course that dynamism of acquiring business, integrating them well. I felt it was very much similar to G. And they launched Six Sigma as well. So obviously I helped them a little bit.
What made you stay put for 20 years at AXA?
I believe that you should never be in your comfort zone. You are always there to learn. You're always there to contribute, but more learning. The moment you become in a comfort zone, you should try to do something else. And you might say being in a company for 20 years means you're in a comfort zone because you know the politics, you know the people. What made me stay at AXA was the opportunity of moving around. Yeah. So I moved from corporate to business units, back to corporate, insurance to asset management. So yes, the 20 years went rather quickly.
And it's gone quickly too here because I'm moving on from 20 years at AXA to what I think was the toughest decision of your life. And I'm going through a very difficult period in some ways as well, because you decided after an immensely successful period to set up your own asset management business. And I say it's your toughest decision because not only is it exciting, going on your own, but also your timing was tough. It was just before COVID. Talk me through this.
Well, when you spend so much time in the corporate world, many of us feel that they have this entrepreneurial spirit. We all wanted to try something entrepreneurial. And of course, you meet many entrepreneurs and you all feel, well, I can do that as well. So I had thought about this for a long time. I thought about Europe, always Europe. It's always Europe. I thought about private assets. And I felt that Europe needed another player in private assets, a sort of mini Blackstone, but European one. And I thought about it for a long time. I had the business plan, left AXA, set up a shop.
And what the timing was this? This is 2019, yeah?
This is end of 2019. So January, office in Mayfair. The name, APM, Capital Partners, so Alternative Portfolio Management, was all focused on private assets. Then we were ready, business plan partners, we had the office, we had some seed money coming in, but of course seed money comes in after a couple of months. And we were ready to go. We had some investment teams that would come. And then March 1st, COVID hit. And of course we didn't know COVID, what it meant. So, let's get on. Then you couldn't travel anymore. Our investors disappeared, focused on something else. And they were going on for another months. And after the summer, October, where we were burning a lot of money, and we couldn't see still the opportunity of traveling. You can't attract money unless you can travel and speak to investors. You couldn't travel. It was impossible to travel. We had to take the tough decision of closing it down. And it was tough because it was a dream. We have carefully built it up. We had a careful business plan. And we failed. And it's okay to fail. And I always say, you fail quickly. We took a tough decision. It was hard emotionally, I still remember, financially as well, but because we spent a lot of money, but that's okay. I mean, it was more. But it also allowed me to become resilient and to come back, because I launched another company on the back of it, which it still exists. So that one has been luckier. But you can never, when you do a business plan, I think this is a good learning. You can never control all the factors. I mean, I didn't have COVID in my business plan. What I had in business plan was the opportunity in Europe, how private assets would really implode in Europe, because there was need for infrastructure, private credit, real estate, private equity. All these private capital, Europe was much behind the US. So from a business plan perspective, I knew where to get the capital. But yes, I had not linked in that we would have a global pandemic.
So you've been in finance, you've been in industry, and you've finally gone for it to become the entrepreneur. And you've had this unbelievable blow through no fault of your own. I mean, who could possibly have dreamt what happened? We haven't seen anything like this since the end of the First World War, the Spanish flu. Again, you said it was upsetting, but I mean, it must have taken a real big blow to your confidence.
Yes, I mean, but I know how to lose. Thank God that I've done enough sports that you can prepare. You can prepare for the final of.
So you were prepared because when we talked about your family and
yes.
your importance of your wife, and you had enough support and enough resilience from everything you've done to take that blow.
Yes, and I remember very well. My wife was a great supporter. She said, "You have to stop this," because she could see I was not sleeping. I was stressed. It was a very important decision, and I couldn't see the way out. And I took the deliberate decision. I remember we talked with our partners and said, "Listen, we need to stop this, because we can't see." There was no clarity on what would happen in the coming months. COVID went on for a long while, as you remember. And unfortunately, at least in this kind of business, we needed capital. We needed to manage capital. And it was hard. It was hard. But I think my past experience, particularly in sports, of losing, understanding why, it gave me the resilience. And I always, this we learn at business school, fail quickly.
Failure is something that is important to learn from and to move on from, but equally so, it can be brutal. And if you do fail at some of those businesses I've mentioned, you end up on the scrap heap quite quickly if you're not up to speed. So there's kind of failure, picking yourself up, learning from it. There's failure where you actually are cast aside. Yes,
but it was a failure from a strong business idea, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about M&G afterwards, but the idea still remains with M&G, because we are very much focused on private assets and Europe. So it did not go away. It was a failure because we were not in the right timing. We didn't have the scale. And more importantly, it didn't stop me from afterwards doing other things. But yes, it was a learning. But when I look backwards, I think the idea was a great one, and as you said, we would have probably been very successful if COVID had not been there. But it is what it is, and you just need to take that.
This is a difficult question because you're the CEO of M&G and you're very committed to it. But do you think you prefer the idea of being an entrepreneur or working for a company? Because you've tried one, it was unlucky, but actually they have different qualities sometimes.
I feel like an entrepreneur. In whatever role I've been, I always felt as if I was owning the company. when I worked for G Lighting, I used to go to hotel rooms and check all the light bulbs just to make sure they were G. And if they were not G, I would turn them off and say that they didn't work. They should buy G rather than Osram or whoever.
I'm sure Frans van Houten did the same at Philips back in the day. Yeah.
Exactly. So I have always felt like an ownership wherever I worked. And so it's not a question about size. Of course, when you're in a larger company, you have a shared ownership with others. And you might say that when you're an entrepreneur, you probably have a bit less of the complexity and the politics that you would not have in a smaller firms. But ultimately, the impact you can have, very often, if you're in a larger company, you actually can have much, much higher impact. You get more scale, you can get more impact on communities. As I said, I created another company in the real estate industry to reduce carbon footprint from real estate.
I'm excited about talking about that. It's called Resustain, and it's about decarbonising real estate. You set it up in 2021.
Yes. After my failure.
Yeah.
So you see, I managed to...
And it's still going. You've had to take on a non-exec role now, obviously, since October 2022, because obviously you can't have the two roles with M&G as well. But it is exciting. And actually, I wanted to ask you about climate, because for me, it's still very important. I'm a veteran of COP21 and COP26 and Dubai and what have you. And it still matters a lot to me and I still get it. Whereas I feel in business at the moment, a lot of people have made the decision to put it on the back burner, to think of other priorities. How important is climate and climate initiatives to you?
For me, it's super important. And I have to say, when the way I set up Resustain was actually, the idea was from my son, not of Resustain, but he came to me and he said, he's young then, he was 8-year-old, and told, Papa, you need to buy an electric car. You cannot drive any car with petrol. And I said, well, why is that? No, because you pollute and we need a better world. And I said, but no, cars are only 3-4%, if I'm not wrong, of carbon emittance in the world. There are other industries. And he said, okay, let's look it up. So we looked it up, we Googled it up, and we saw that real estate was one of the largest contributors. And actually 40%, but then of course residential is difficult, but commercial real estate is 10% of CO2 emission in the world. So then I started thinking, I said, okay, but who are the owners of real estate? It's the large pension funds, the large insurance companies, sovereign wealth fund. There's something here I can do because I have all the connections. And then I started thinking, I spoke with some of our partners again, and we said, okay, what about real estate? How come real estate is so poor in terms of emission? And then we looked into it and we saw that buildings, in particular offices, were very inefficient with heating. So it's about cold and hot water, cold and hot air. And that's all managed what we call the BMS, a centralized system, which is not dynamic, it's static. So we started saying, okay, well, how can we dynamize this? Well, we should have a software. And so we invented the software. We took some PhDs from Oxford and Cambridge, came up with a software, we plug it in, and then with AI, actually, we build a twin of the building, and we improve energy efficiency by 40% just by optimizing the BMS.
Which is phenomenal. And I'll just ask you one more question about this. It wasn't in my notes, but that might be one of your proudest decisions, I would say. You built a business because your son made you world aware of this issue, and you sat down with your son, and then you created a business model. You must be really proud of that.
Yes, I'm of course. It is. If I have to say, from an entrepreneurial perspective, that's the one I'm the most proud of.
Yeah.
And it has an impact. It has an impact. Now, of course, because it's a small business, we don't have all these buildings. If this was GE, we would have had millions of buildings.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm coming back to what I said before, entrepreneurial versus larger organization. But for sure, it and interesting enough also here, I learned a little bit from my past entrepreneurial experience. We didn't take an office in Mayfair. We said we're going to work from home in the beginning.
Yeah.
We had
We learned that lesson from COVID.
I learned the lesson from COVID. We hired very few people. So we were very careful on expenses versus revenues. So it was less of a slam dunk.
Okay, the most important decision you've made business-wise of the last 3 years is joining M&G. You were approached late 2022. You became the CEO. You were announced. And straight away, people are saying, well, you've got asset management, life insurance, pension business. What is this crazy business? Everyone's going to come knocking for you to split up the company. Tell me about your decision to take the job and your decision to say, no, we're going to keep these businesses together?
Those three businesses that you just said, in particular life insurance and asset management, that was the main attraction for me. I believe asset management, particularly if it focused on private assets, having a life insurance balance sheet that support those private assets with permanent capital is a competitive advantage. So those two businesses for me were the key attraction to join M&G. And of course, I would never split them, because why would I take away the competitive advantage? And the other real attraction was the focus on Europe. It comes back to my heritage. I believe in Europe. I'm a European. I think Europe still, in particular on private assets, has an enormous scope of growth. Governments want to do the energy transition. They need infrastructure projects for that. We know Europe is built on small, medium enterprises. They need access to flexible capital, whether it is private equity or private debt. The banks are retrenching. So private markets, capital markets is going to grow in Europe. There is still an enormous opportunity there. And that was the second focus. And I felt that having a balance sheet, but the balance sheet needs to grow because you cannot allocate too much. You have to have a certain allocation. But that was the necessary fuel to grow private assets. And that has been our model. That's what we've been focused on. And we've been doing well since I joined with a very strong team.
And I know I've raised this to you when you've very kindly come in to talk to us on earnings, but there's a gold rush going on. I mean, I'm not talking about the AI gold rush, which is obviously moving apace. I'm talking about the private markets, private debt, private equity. I know you bought P Capital Partners.
Yes.
We've 70% there. We've talked a lot about that previously as well. But are you worried that wherever there's a gold rush or people are desperate to get into private markets, there's going to be a lot of failures?
Yes, there is a gold rush into private markets, but let's look at Europe is still underpenetrated if you look at private markets. Still, debt, if you look at loans, banks hold roughly 70% still in Europe. In the US, it's the contrary. It's the capital markets, so asset managers providing 70% of the loans of private debt. So, and we know banks are retrenching. Basel II, they're retrenching their balance sheets, so there is an opportunity there. So I would say Europe still, there is a lot of opportunities for growth. Then clearly Europe is complex. It's not the same thing operating in Scandinavia than operating in Spain or in Italy or in Greece for that matter. And France and Germany are very different countries as well. So that complexity also to a certain extent holds off certain organizations. I think the Americans, of course, who are always number one in everything, they think, okay, we can come in here, we can do whatever we want. Yes, be my guest, come, please. They're doing well, but I think we have an edge here because we understand Europe well. We know how to operate in the different countries. So I'm not overly concerned about the gold rush into private markets. I think there's a great opportunity on infrastructure. As I said before, governments are committed to spend more on energy transition, on defense now as well. All that's going to mean there's going to be a need for a lot of infrastructure projects. And governments, as we all know, are heavily indebted. So they will need to find private companies sort of supporting with capital here. So that's a great opportunity. And the same thing on private credit. And of course, then the last one is we need to look at also at the savers. Europeans live longer. They still have way too much cash. Cash doesn't produce any yield. Well, it produces a little bit of yield, but not enough. And therefore, they need to have access more to equities, listed, but also private markets. So that's the opportunity in Europe and in the UK.
Yeah, we name this show Executive Decisions, but there needs to be a collective decision across Europe, across the politics, from savers perhaps as well, from the financial industry, to actually be a bit braver, to put on a little bit more risk, to have more of an American attitude. Is that the decision that Europe needs to make at this pivotal moment in history?
So, you said the right thing. Europe has been a little bit too risk adverse. We have been probably regulating a little bit too much. We will have to take on some more controlled risk. And that is something Europe will need to look into. I'm saying being a little bit more American, not fully American, but a little bit more American. And
also American and going back to one of the points we raised earlier, in our attitude to failure.
Yes, in our attitude
Pick
to failure.
yourself
because
up
you can
and learn.
Fail. Of course, you can fail. When I was an insurer, the best way of not having a claim was not underwriting a risk. But then you have no business. So you underwrite risk. Yes, you will have some claims. That's okay. That's part of insurance. I mean, so it's this mentality. But Europe is in a very pivotal moment at this time. I mean, there has never been so much interest into Europe in 25 years of careers I have. People want to invest into Europe. People are talking about Europe again. Japanese, Korean, Americans, Canadians, they all want to invest in Europe. Has Europe changed really? Not so much. Yes, there is more money into defense. There is governments who are saying they want to push for growth, a little bit less of regulation. But now Europe needs to execute.
Andrea, I want to come to the final couple of questions. And perhaps the most important decisions you can make in your life is how to balance your life. There was a very famous CEO, and I'm not going to name him, who said to me a couple of years ago, and I said, well, what do you do at the weekends? He said, what's a weekend? He was a certain type of man. He was incredibly driven. He had a very stressful job. But if you don't have balance in your life, then the kind of pressure job you have will drive you mad. Tell me how you find balance in your life. What is the offset? What's the yin to the yang?
No, and you need balance. I mean, you said it before. If I had not had that balance, I would have been alone when I failed as an entrepreneur. I mean, it was good to have my wife, my son there. My son gave me the next idea for the next entrepreneurial project. No, balance for me is critical. And the weekends, I try to actually not work. I try to be spending time with my family, but more importantly, actually get out and walk. So I play golf, I play tennis. Yeah, these are individual sports.
I was going to say.
More difficult to do team sports now.
At our age, we have to give it up.
I have a certain age. I mean, if I try to play football, I hurt myself directly.
We just have to accept.
We just have
things
to accept.
Are different.
We have to accept. But it's important that you sort of do something else. And yes, I spend time with my son. I bring him to school even during the week on purpose, even picking him up sometimes. And that's important because if you don't have that balance, yes, then running a FTSE 100 company, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. And probably also during the weekend. But you need to find that balance. You need to be able to, and you also need to show example to your colleagues. Because I don't want my colleagues either to work. Of course, during crisis, during the weekend, we might have to. But I wanted to find that right balance. It's fundamental.
It's been absolutely a real pleasure getting to know you more. We've always had a great relationship, and now I feel I've known so much, and I think our listeners will learn an awful lot as well. So, Andrea Rossi, thank you so much indeed for joining me.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
I really think this edition of Executive Decisions will resonate with so many of you out there who are trying to get to the top of your professions. Andrea comes from this extraordinary multicultural, pan-European background, but he's been to some of the top schools, business schools, and followed traditional learning patterns such as Six Sigma, all of which has created the man he is today. But he's had ups and downs. His entrepreneurial career was hit dramatically by COVID, but he didn't let that define him. In fact, he used the lessons learned there to become the CEO he is today. I think anyone aspiring to get to the top of the C-suite will really enjoy listening to Andrea Rossi's story. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on Executive Decisions. I would love to hear your feedback. Drop your thoughts in the comments or a review, and please hit that follow or subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next episode of the podcast, which is dropping on Tuesday, where I speak to Estelle Brachlianoff.
The world is not exactly easy at times, and you can complain. You can complain about politicians, you can complain about, the economics, you can complain about many things. This is not my way. I'm more what can I do about it?
I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you then.